I first was pushed into work because my mental sensor was money is my gateway to freedom.
Klaus Kleinfeld is a German businessman known for leading global giants like Siemens, Alcoa, and Arconic. As CEO of Siemens, he modernized the company. After Siemens, he took the helm at Alcoa, later leading its transformation and spin-off into Arconic, where he focused on advanced manufacturing and aerospace.
My mother always used to say, what people don't pay for isn't worth anything. I was thrown into work at an early age. My father died when I was very young. Then I decided this is part of my life and I better do the things that I like and develop this very simple principle. I love it or I don't love it and I can change it. If I come to the conclusion that I can't change it to love it, then I leave it. I always was very clear, and that's probably life is not endless. You better use it in a way that you enjoy it.
In 2017, he joined Saudi Arabia's NEOM project, later becoming an advisor to Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. Now through his investment firm, K2 Elevation, he focuses on technology and biotech innovation. His career is marked by high-stakes leadership, transformation, and strategic foresight.
If you are not energized yourself, you cannot energize others. Many people think this is great advice, but I don't have the time for it. Many of the energy practices do not need much time. Recharge is part of performance. Downtime is productive time. Not everything works for everyone. Take a step. The first step is always the most difficult, but in this case, it's always the most rewarding.
Welcome to Success Story. I'm your host, Scott Clary. The Success Story podcast is part of the HubSpot podcast network. HubSpot not only supports the show, but they support entrepreneurs. That's why I'm such a huge fan of HubSpot. And I'm very grateful for HubSpot for supporting the show because they help entrepreneurs. And as a fellow entrepreneur, I know it takes a lot to grow your business, a lot of audience attracting, a lot of sales, a lot of marketing, a lot of lead scoring, a lot of channel management, a lot of content, a lot of long days, late nights, a lot of weekends, a lot of wishing there was an easier way, but there is. With Breeze, this is HubSpot's new collection of AI tools. It's easier than ever for marketers, for entrepreneurs to attract audiences, to increase leads, to score customers, and to close deals fast, which means pretty soon your company will have a lot to celebrate. Visit HubSpot.com/marketers to learn more. You titled your book Leading to Thrive. Explain to me all the other ways that people try and lead. What are the other outcomes of leadership that people get wrong?
Oof, man, I don't even know where to start. So, I was born in Germany, raised in Germany, so on the, and I was born in the north, so a very Prussian, Prussian tradition. Prussian tradition is it's all about discipline, There's no excuse. You plow through, you're tough, and you get going, and whatever the task is, you don't renege on it, you get the task done, So this is my original upbringing, So fortunately, something inside of me was wiser to say, well, you have to know what you can do, and you have to balance that. It's good to push yourself. I'm very much for growing your boundaries, So then I've also seen some people who believe that when you are a leader, when not only you're not leading yourself, but when you lead others, the best is you put pressure on them, and I remember I had one person, who told me, I look at the people who work for me like a lemon, and I press a lemon and there's juice coming out, and I press the lemon again and there's more juice coming out. Press it again, there's more. And one day I don't get any lemon juice out of it, and then the lemon has to be replaced with a new lemon, So that might have worked in the past, long time ago. These days, talent is one of the hottest commodities that you can think about, and you have to attract people. And there, I think it's not just the stick, that you work, but it's also the carrot. So you want to make sure that people have passion in it, that people grow in the business. So I've always believed in the end, it's the two elements, it's the carrot and the stick, and you have to make things attractive for people and have to have something that's in it for them, And this can be all kinds of things. Fun definitely can be one, Purpose is a big one. If people see that the vision that you have put out as a leader, is something that's worth following beyond just the economic basis of the company, delivering better lives to people, which is unfortunately the case for many businesses, that's a big motivator, a huge motivator, frankly, So those are kind of some of these things,
You lead to better the individual lives. Now, I mean, you've managed and led 2 Fortune 500 companies, which is an incredible feat. But when people look at big corporations, I don't think somebody would look at a big corporation and be like, "Hey, I'm going to go work there to improve my life." I think that a lot of people, when they get into the 9 to 5 mindset, they're like, "This is a job, and I want to advance, and I want to make more money, and then I'm going to have my life on the side, and I'm going to have this concept of work-life balance," which I don't necessarily agree with. I do believe that work should be integrated to your life. But when you look at sort of your peers and even what you've done, who do you think is doing an exceptional job of championing like this idea of leading to thrive, not just leading to extract as much value out of these lemons as possible and deliver back to the shareholders?
Well, this is multiple questions in one, So let's chop the elephant one by one, because you mentioned a couple of very, very important points. There's this whole discussion about life-work balance, and that's. You have no idea how often I've had my wife having that conversations with colleagues of mine, during dinner parties or whatever, where she comes back and somebody whisper into your husband is working a lot, so kind of like an accusation, and frankly, for me, I never believed in this work and life thing. I always thought I was thrown into work at an early age because my father died when I was very young, but then somehow I decided this is part of my life and I better do the things that I like, and develop this very simple principle. I love it. And obviously I love it and I stay in it and do more of it, or I don't love it and I can change it, then I try to change it, and that I love it, and if I come to the conclusion that I can't change it to love it, then I leave it. Because I always was very clear, and that's probably because I was confronted with the death of loved ones at a young age, that life is it's ending. I mean, it's not endless. Life is not endless. It has a beginning and an end, so you better use it in a way that you enjoy it, And I actually, the older I get, the more I think that this concept of work and life distinction is a classical industrial age concept. Before it didn't exist, We opened at Alcoa, I still remember this. We opened a smelter in Iceland, and was one of the first industrial. Actually, we were the first industrial base that came into this fjord. The fjord was all fishermen, and one time, the head of the plant had issues because people didn't show up. And then he went back into the village and said, "Where are they? The tons, they didn't come." And they said, "What do you mean? It's a great day to be out there fishing." And we had to tell them that in an industrial environment, particularly when you run large things like a smelter, you have to run it 24 hours, 7 days a week, including any day, so you can't just say it's a nice day and you go out. So, but a strong reminder that in the end, in the old days, nobody would have ever had the idea that life and work are two different things. Better integrate that and don't have that understanding when it's too late, So that's the one point. And are there role models who have done that? Yes, and it's not necessarily the famous names, It's more, there are some famous names, but it's more also people who I saw in my direct surrounding. My grandfather, for instance, is still with in his 80s, he was working in kind of civil service, but voluntary civil service, and did this with the same passion that he has brought to every job. A good friend of mine who just recently died, Henry Kissinger. He was over 100 years old, and I really got friends with Henry when he was in his late 70s. So and it was wonderful. But even until the last breath that came out of him, he was working on a book that was just published, on AI, on all things. And I think what he added to the discussion on AI. is very, very, very important with the perspectives. And what he added to this planet has been very important. But he never saw it as, hey, there's life, there's work. He enjoyed this and led it together. And I would highly recommend to everybody, do it that way.
When do you think your view, because you mentioned before, so you grew up in this very, I wouldn't say like, I'd say a relatively tough childhood. I mean, your father passed away young. That's not easy. And there's this culture of work and pushing through these difficult periods and continuing on. That's sort of the culture that you were raised with. So when did your version of work, of leadership, start to understand or start to be I guess, bring in more components of balance and of thriving on a personal, professional level, and of energy management, something you speak about a lot? When did your view start to change?
This never comes like it drops from heaven and then it's there. It comes gradually. So I first was pushed into work, because not only did my father die young, but we were refugees from East Germany, and East Germany was split. So all of our family was in the East, and my mother and father were the only ones who were in the West, really. And then later on, my grandfather and his wife joined. But we were pretty much on our own. So that was why I was pushed into it. I then realized, okay, I better enjoy it, and I better do my mental sensor was, money is my gateway to freedom. I want to basically have the personal freedom to do whatever I want to do, and money is my gateway to this. So in a way, I also saw it as a measure of what my mother always used to say: what people don't pay for isn't worth anything. And I think she basically tried to instill this as a mindset into myself, to not being abused, so abused in a way, I'm not meaning physically abused, but basically where people are misusing your friendliness, that you are doing something for them, and then in the end, people also don't value that. So that was very helpful. So those kind of things happen, but the very fact that I realized the energy part came relatively late in the game. It was actually one day that a very good friend of mine who I worked together with came into my office in the late evening, and told me, Klaus, I was a big fan of time management. You've been following the wrong god, so to say. Time, you've been pushing us into that late evening sessions, and what was it good for? It didn't last, and he was right. And then we went into, and he said, it's all about energy. And he quoted a bunch of folks who had just published a book on that, and he won the argument. And since then, I've been looking into it. And what really, tipped me over after this conversation is that I started to look at high performance athletes, because I always thought that my analogy of success in business was ultra marathons. You run and run and run, which comes from the whole idea of plow through. You just have to be trained enough, train more. But then it changed into life is not about constantly running, but it's about running and taking time to recharge. Running, taking time to recharge. So it's basically, time to recharge is productive time. So, and then I looked at high performance athletes and realized why its CEO tenure was going down, while when you look at the burnout rate, even in young people, is going tremendously up. When you looked at some of the family lives, like divorce, children that don't talk to them, this was getting more and more and more dysfunctional families. Whereas on the high performance athlete side, you saw almost in all sports, and the one that I love most is tennis, so I saw that they are getting older, then they perform on a very top level, at an age that was not even thinkable before, and win. So I was wondering what the hell is going on there. I started to look into this and realized, wow, there's a method behind this. Let's learn this method, because I always thought a leader, in the end, you have to have energy, because you have to energize others when you want to lead, So I want to learn from this high performance athletes, that started their journey.
I love it. And I think that it's very important to note. So there's a lot of different themes that you speak about in this book and sort of in your work. And the title of the book is Leading to Thrive. But if you're going to lead and help other people thrive, you have to embody some of these things that allow you to thrive as well, because people are going to mirror you. So if you focus on time, other people will focus on time management. And if you are a high performing individual and a CEO or a founder, and you build this wonderful company, but you don't have relationships with your family and you don't have, your two ex-wives later, but don't worry, you've made a lot of money.
Exactly.
Well, people start to look at that and they're like, well, maybe that's not exactly what I want. So there's some lack.
I think the first thing is you would
Yeah.
get that. And on your last day on this planet, I mean, I recently had a conversation with the heir apparent of a very, very successful family where the father made all the money, multi-billions in one lifetime. And we had a long evening together, and at the end she said, "But Klaus," and I knew him. I knew him relatively well. And she said, "You knew Klaus? He wasn't happy. He never was happy. You know?" And I agree with that. He never was happy. He was proud of what he's done, and he had all right to be proud. But happy, enjoying life? No, he didn't. And then, the last day comes and you can't course correct anymore.
Of course. So that to bring it back to what I was mentioning, it's just that when you act a certain way, people mirror you. So if you only focus on time, or if you only focus on like traditional success metrics, that's what other people are going to think is important. So it's very important for a leader. The through line is it's very important for a leader to understand how to optimize their life and how to have the integration between their family and their business and their wealth or whatever, how much money they make. But also, how do you manage your energy? Because if you can manage your energy, then you're going to be able to fulfill all these buckets appropriately. But if you don't, then one of those buckets is going to be severely deficient. And I think it's beautiful because I don't think a lot of people focus on energy management. A lot of people do focus on time management.
The high performance athletes all do. They all do.
But it doesn't transcend business as much as it should.
It hasn't transcended into business at all. I mean, many of the very good practices, that help you gain energy are today seen as wellness, happiness. Yes, it also leads often to wellness and to more happiness. But in truth, the real measure that you have as a business guy is performance. If you are not energized yourself, you cannot energize others. So your performance, I mean, how can you be a leader without energizing others? It's impossible unless you have a big stick, and you constantly, chase them around. But then you lose all the top talent, and it's only a question in midterm, when the thing turns down.
So talk to me about sort of the sources of energy that you tap into.
So, I mean, the simple version is it's body, mind, and soul. I split mind into kind of emotional as well as mental. So, I mean, body is clear. It's all a lot about movement. So, but what's not so clear on some parts is the role of breathing in this. A very simple way to control yourself. What's also not so clear to many is how do you get to a good night's sleep. So I mean those things are not so well understood. Then on the emotional side, I mean, the thing that I always realize people don't realize is when I tell the story about Buddha, how did Buddha manage his emotion? And Buddha is going around India, and comes to a village, and one villager is really mad with him. He yells at him and throws crap at him. And after 20 minutes, finally, the guy stops talking because Buddha has not responded and says, "Well, what do you say?" And Buddha says, "Let me ask you a question. If somebody comes to present you a present and you are not taking the present, who then owns the present? Obviously, the person who wants to give the present hasn't gotten rid of the present, so the person who owns it." What he really was saying is, whatever your emotions are, you have no way to put these on me. I control the emotions entirely myself, and you can yell at me, you can jump around, accuse me forever. It doesn't affect me. I'm in charge of my own emotions. I'm not accepting that you give me this presence of your negative emotions. So literally, you're fully in control of your own emotions. You have to train a little bit, but But I think that's for many people a huge, huge discovery. And then there are some tricks like compartmentalizations and stuff like that. And then on the mental side, I mean, the question is focus. I mean, how many people have I seen, who did not see an opportunity where others saw an opportunity, or see only obstacles where others see opportunities, So it's really, really about focus. And then on the spiritual side is the alignment with your own values, and that you can't even discuss in business circles. I mean, I actually was wondering whether I should put that into my book originally, and that gives you an idea. But it is a big chapter in my book, because from my personal experience, I have to say the spiritual energy is one of the most important energy sources in very, very tough times. I mean, I wish nobody to have tough times, but when the times are very dire, that is one of the most important sources of energy.
When you were leading these massive companies, did you speak openly about energy and even spiritual, or were you just worried about being laughed out of the room if you brought these concepts up?
No, as I said, I mean, the energy management side came relatively late, into my knowledge. I would say probably about, when was it, 27, 8 or so, roughly 7, 8, 9, 10 or whatever, so something around that nature, So the people who I worked with, I talked about this, and also try to teach everybody, through some experts, how to best use that. But I mean, I also didn't think of writing a book. I mean, the motivation to write a book, even if you would have asked me 2 years ago, would you write a book? I would have said, no way. I'm sitting behind my desk way too many hours anyway. But the motivation of writing the book was a more intense work with CEOs as a mentor. And I realized how important this concept and a deeper understanding of it was for them to chart their course in a more successful, performance-wise way. And one thing that was most interesting to me to see that even in the very young generation, people who do startups, who founders, how fast they are burning out. I mean, super fast they are burning out. When you see how many people are even in the media in the 30s, early 30s, who have burned out as a founder, this is insane, and I thought this is not okay. I mean, this is just not okay. I cannot let that pass. And I also don't have the capacity to do it all. So I said, I have to find a multiplier. Let's write a book about it,
Today's episode is brought to you by Tailor Brands. Now, here's a wild stat. 60% of Americans dream about starting their own business, but less than 20% actually take the plunge. Now, why is that? Let's face it, building a business feels overwhelming. But what if I told you there's a way to make it simple? This is where Tailor Brands comes in, your complete business building companion. They've turned the intimidating process of starting a business into something you can actually handle. If you need an LLC, done in minutes. If you're trying to protect your personal assets, they've got you covered. They'll hook you up with everything from legal documents to licenses to permits, even a personalized business plan. Plus, their business coaching program will guide you through your crucial first 100 days. And the best part is you get all the tools you need to build your brand, manage your invoices, handle your bookkeeping, basically everything you need to launch with confidence. And there's an exclusive deal for all Success Story podcast listeners. You get 35% off when you visit tailorbrands.com/podcast35. Don't let your business dreams stay dreams. Get started today with Tailor Brands. It is, I'm sure, I mean, you've been working and you've been building for so long. I guess you see a significant difference. For me, I'm 34. So I see all the same people burning out, but it just seems like my peers, it seems like almost like a prerequisite for building a successful career, because so many of them are doing it. I know it's not, but it just seems to be the norm, right? And if you look at your entire career, nobody can look at you and say that you didn't basically accomplish what most people would dream to accomplish running publicly traded Fortune 500 companies. It's pretty much the extreme of stress and performance and whatever you want to accomplish. That's right up there. But even, coming from you, it's interesting. You're saying that people are still not the way that people work right now is not a healthy way for people to work, even though you come from an environment of running one of the largest companies in the world.
Well, but they don't. The interesting thing is, many people think, oh, this is great advice, but I don't have the time for it. And what they don't realize is that many of the energy practices do not need much time. You have to have a conceptual understanding, and I give you the extreme example of this. I mean, if you look at top tennis players, the average top games last about more than 2 hours. So and they cannot just say, I have 20 minutes of time, I recharge, even though it's a hot day and I'm playing in Australia. So the tennis association allows you only 20 seconds between the serves. It's 20 seconds. That's your kind of relaxation time. But what they have learned is how to condition themselves, in such a way that in these 20 seconds, they can fully recharge. I mean, not fully, but maximum recharge. And there are techniques around how you do that. And what you see it today when you watch a tennis game, they all have their routines. And when they get the new balls, they do something with it, something odd. Everybody has an odd, strange routine. They squeeze it, take 3 balls, squeeze it, throw 2 away, get another one. Why they do that, they have a movie going through their head, that completely recharges them. This is a learned routine. And these are things that pretty much all of the kind of top-notch pros, use today, including also special forces. I mean, everybody uses that, Breathing plays a big important role. Yes, you have to have physical fitness. Yes, no doubt, helps, But I think the discovery of saying, if I recharge is part of performance, I mean, downtime is productive time. But it doesn't mean that you have to have equal downtime to the productive time. That's not necessary. You can develop micro habits. A good friend of mine, he works in Hong Kong at a high rise. His micro routine is he gives his cell phone to his assistant, and then drives down on the elevator. Takes a few minutes walk around the block. Fresh air goes up again. And if somebody calls him, his assistant is right there and says, "Wait a second," he will come back in the next 10 minutes. I call you back. That's easy, and everybody can do that, And there's a ton of stuff like that that I also wanted to put out and put into the books. Very practical things, to recharge.
I think that's important too. I think that even those small things can really help somebody reframe. The worst thing you can do is just sit with your thoughts and stress for hours on end. And now, because we're virtual, I mean, myself included, we don't even leave the house if we don't force ourselves to leave the house. So you just end up sitting with your own thoughts. You have a really good story in the book about the miracle on the Hudson and why this illustrates it. Explain to me why this, you can walk through the story, but explain why it sort of ties back to this concept.
Well, this now comes to the dynamics of energy, and what happened. Sadie Sullivan is the captain. It's a nice day and cold, like today. It's cold. It's sunny. It's blue sky, and they are going down south. And they are talking to each other, the co-pilot and him, and then a flock of geese hits. They hit a flock of geese while they are ascending. And first one engine goes off, then the other engine goes off. And those who know New York, he comes from LaGuardia. He turns to the left. It's where the George Washington Bridge is. Over the George Washington Bridge, both engine goes off. There's an airport right there. He thinks he can get there, but then he realizes it won't get him there, and then he basically turns left and goes and lands in the Hudson, So the likelihood of landing a plane safely on water is close to zero, So the guy's kind of crazy, But when you see what's been happening is he goes obviously from he's relaxed. He is in basically almost like in relaxation. It's a beautiful day. They're going home. We had a great time in New York, So his colleague is a good friend, blah, blah, blah. They are talking to each other about what's happening in New York. Boom, these skis come on. He goes from basically relaxation, and to performance zone to survival zone. Boom, survival zone, What happens in survival zone? Adrenaline, this beautiful thing of adrenaline kicks in, hormones. And adrenaline is extremely good. It makes us superhuman, so your focus shifts, all other body functions get reduced. You're completely focused on the task, and you are literally superhuman. But then if you stay in that too long, you burn out. Boom, So, but what he does, he then switches back to performance zone. He basically, you can see it in the transcript. He first asks the tower, can I land there in New Jersey? They give him permission to land. Then he turns around, doesn't even talk to the tower anymore, picks up the microphone and says, prepare for impact to the cabin, and then he lands, So how can somebody do this? He did it purely in performance zone, and why was he able to go with 2 engines off, landing on that and to go back into performance zone? Because he has trained this in a simulator thousands of times. Not only has he trained it in his training, but he was a trainer from the airline, So obviously experience helps. If you can move into a pattern where you say, I know what's going on here. I know how to handle this. And now we're going to land that plane. So he managed to go back between these patterns, extremely well.
It's interesting. And if you're talking to an entrepreneur or somebody who's earlier on in their career, what would be the advice to manage these different energy zones for sort of peak performance so you don't burn out?
Well, the first one is, relaxation time is productive time. Don't go into the fall and think of an ultra marathon, where you push and push and push and eventually and forget to recharge. Eventually you hit the wall and that's it. No. Find a way how you can, get into your performance zone, and when you feel, do some recharging. Again, recharging can be very short, like my friend in Hong Kong. Get down on the elevator, go out, listen to a piece of music, or whatever you like that gives you energy. There's thousands of things. Listen to a painting, or whatever, or call a friend for 5 minutes, write a nice email or whatever gives you energy, and then get back in it. Just get back in it, or close your eyes to a breathing exercise, boom, gets you back into it. That's one thing. Secondly, whenever you feel you're going from performance zone into survival zone, understand that has a positive one because you're now superhuman. It has also a positive one because you're expanding your comfort zone. So it's good if you do that once in a while, but the moment this goes on, it's like you're on a clock. Now you have to make sure that you're relatively quickly going back to your performance zone. So in reality, you have to find a way how you frame the situation differently, so that you are able to go back into your performance zone, right? So take an action that gets you out of the survival zone into your performance zone, or train this in a controlled environment, like Sully has done. He's been in a simulator in a controlled environment on smaller. I've done restructurings many times. When it started with small restructurings, then they got big, and then they got very big, and they got gigantically big, But if I had done the gigantically big one, I probably would have died, So, but as I knew going into it, I had a pattern recognition and said, oh, this is happening. Oh, this is happening. So, you know how to handle it,
You mentioned something, so I want to move on to some of the restructurings and sort of some transformational leadership stories that you've been a part of, because I think that you have some incredible stories. You can pick which ones you think are most relevant to the audience, but one that in particular I found interesting was you managed the Siemens X-ray division turnaround. You managed Alcoa from 2008, 2009. There was some crises that you dealt with. So talk to me about, now we understand sort of the playbook for what is optimal leadership, what is optimal leadership for yourself, for your team, for your company. Now, you've applied this very successfully. So let's talk about how a leader operating in the right mind actually sort of executes.
Well, I think it brings us to the pinnacle that connects us, because on the energy side, the one thing we didn't talk about was purpose. We haven't talked about purpose, and purpose is what a laser does to light. When light is normally diffuse, you turn it into laser, it brings it into a beam that can literally go through any material, destroy anything, And that's what purpose does to energy. Energy is diffuse, you have it, but the moment you say, this is my purpose, or these are my purposes, you suddenly have something where the energy goes into tune, you know? So this is important. Now, purpose on the business side, if you want to translate your own purpose or the purpose of the business into the people who work for you, what we would need a vision. We need a vision that makes them understand I'm doing something that has a higher value than just putting together X-ray machines, and angiography machines, And the problem there was at Siemens, it was the longest standing division at medical, super successful, the birthplace of Siemens Medical. But it has kind of been put into the shadow by the more modern ones like ultrasound, computed tomography, magnetic resonance, and was also not making money. So many people had tried to turn it around, and then they gave it to me, kind of another guy trying it out, And I asked them to be able to go to hospitals to see how the equipment is used, and that was the moment, when my aha moment, because I realized when I saw the patient and talked to the doctors that we had something that nobody else had. We actually could use the X-ray for not just the diagnosis, but also for the intervention, for the cure. And you may remember, you're too young probably to remember, but many other might remember, there was a time when surgery was the thing. These days, fortunately, you can do a lot called minimally invasive, So where literally not even anesthesia is needed for this. And that needs image guidance in most cases, So you need an X-ray machine to see where is this thing in your body that they are pushing through, So I had this idea. Then I invited a young woman to our all hands meeting, who I knew, whose life was saved, by exactly that, the right diagnosis with our equipment and then also treatment. And didn't tell anybody. She told her story, and I gave her, in the medical environment, you have stringent regulations. So you have to document who worked on what machine. So I gave her the list of all people who had worked on the machines that she was diagnosed and treated with. She read out this names and brought the people on stage. Whoa, I mean, these are people in the northern part of Bavaria who cannot easily be moved, They've seen a lot in their lives, But on that day, there were a lot of people with tears in their eyes, So now I mean, in the evening, the head of the labor union basically told me, Klaus, you brought our soul back, So because before they saw themselves as a restructuring case, and I'd completely forgotten what great things they have been doing. And I told some of the people on the shop floor, who were late with their equipment, I said, do you understand that this equipment goes to the US, to that little village? The village has just taken the old machine out, and now in the radius of about 100 miles, people cannot be diagnosed. Are you aware that this is what's happening because we cannot get this machine shipped on time, And the moment people understand this is one thing, but the moment they see a patient and realize, this could be me, this could be my mother, this could be my sister, that makes all the difference. I mean, so from that on, motivational, I don't think we had an issue, and business-wise, we did the right things.
I just want to take a quick break and thank the HubSpot Podcast Network for supporting Success Story for the past few years. Now, the HubSpot Podcast Network has other incredible podcasts like My First Million. Now, if you are an entrepreneur or you are ready to turn your entrepreneurial dreams into millions, you have to listen to My First Million. It's a show that is revolutionizing business podcasting. It's hosted by Sam Parr, Sean Purry. This is a HubSpot Podcast Network original. It brings you unfiltered conversations with self-made millionaires who actually tell you how they did it. If you want to learn how Alex Hormozi built his fitness empire, or how Sofia Amoruso turned Nasty Girl into a fashion phenomenon, these aren't just success stories, they're the blueprints for your own journey to the top. Each episode breaks down the exact strategies and hidden opportunities that you can use right now. Don't just dream about your first million, learn how to make it. Listen to My First Million wherever you get your podcasts. And this is what ended up helping with the turnaround of the whole division.
That was major for the turnaround, major.
I wonder how many people listening to this who are working in jobs understand the purpose of the company that they're working for.
Yes, there my upbringing in partially two societies has helped me being sensitive to this, because it was Karl Marx who criticized capitalism and said the industrialization has really led to a lack of understanding of for the worker what the work is good for. So the worker has become an completely exchangeable good, and we have to bring meaning to them back. And I strongly believe that. And I think it's doable in almost all jobs. We did the same thing in Alcoa with inviting an astronaut, and having an astronaut talk to the employees.
Was this how you managed the crisis in July 2008?
No, in 2008, this was this was not a question of our motivation. Everybody was motivated, big time motivated. This was more a question of the world is coming to an end, and we had the price of metal drop to 1/3, drop to in less than 6 months. So let's say you have $100, and suddenly the good that you're producing only gets sold for $30. There's no way you can adjust to this, just none. And that it was brilliant response from the whole organization. But the organization was hugely motivated. I mean, was lucky to have a very, very.
But they still had to understand, like every single director, every single executive still had to understand the purpose that you were trying to achieve. Because if not, I mean, nothing is keeping them there. They can still go somewhere else and they can jump ship if they feel like this is not going in the right direction.
That is correct. That's correct. The more people you can have, you will never be able to get everybody into passionate believer, Some people are cynics. Some people just say, hey, I don't give a damn. I'm just in it for the money. It's fine, And some of it, yeah, whatever, So, but that's fine, But the more people you can make understood why they are doing what they are doing and what the impact of that is, the better off you are.
I'm curious because obviously this is important to you because it's been impactful in your life. How did you had a good relationship with Kissinger. What was his purpose and how did he align that with what your personal goals were? Because I find that very fascinating as well.
Well, Henry would probably be much better suited if he were still alive to say that. I think how I perceived him, he had a very amazing life, born in Germany, then fled to the US, very humbling experience here in New York, and then went as a university. He defined himself as a history professor. He never defined himself, I think, as a politician. That came probably a little later. But even in his late life, I think his main self-definition was, I'm a history professor. And there's this old saying, history doesn't repeat, but it rhymes, and I think he believed in that. He believed in the deeper the understanding you have on historic mechanisms, the better off you are in seeing things around the corner. And one of my measures for leaders is I don't measure the leader of explaining to me what they've done in the past and why certain things work and why they didn't. I look at a leader of somebody who looks around the corner, who can basically tell me this is most likely what can happen, give me a range of good and bad and say these are the counteraction or this is how we're going to use it. And Henry, I think, saw himself like that, and how can this be used in a way to make the US stronger, to be honest. That was always, I think, his perspective.
I think that, if I look at your work too, you've obviously, I think that, first of all, I agree. I think that it's smart to study the past and to look for patterns. And I think that you don't always have to reinvent the wheel. That's half the reason why, this podcast is trying to tap into the wisdom, not that far in the past, but tap into wisdom of people that have sort of figured it out. So the listeners don't have to reinvent the wheel and figure things out from scratch, right? That's really the goal of this. And I think that's the goal of his work. And that's what you sort of adopted as well, because I see again a pattern. Like you reference Sun Tzu, you reference Clausewitz, so you reference historical works that impact how you think and how you strategize. So now that makes a ton of sense. So talk to me about even some of this sort of strategic historical wisdom that you speak about.
Well, in the book, the biggest part, the biggest section on historic wisdom is the part on purpose, because I've always struggled with this concept of purpose. And I thought this is a good thing that I used the time for writing a book to figure it out for myself, to sort it out. And then I decided that the best thing is to make this process transparent for the reader, because my assumption was that many are struggling in the same way or have been struggling in the same way that I have. Yet, it is a concept that has been relevant for mankind almost as long as mankind exists. And that's kind of fascinating, you know. So how is it that that there is a concept that is so important and still, you know, we're not talking about it much, you know. So that's why I call it a ride through time and space when you go through this chapter. And it starts with, fundamental ancient religions and goes into the Greeks as well as the Romans, you know, looks at Stoics, you know, looks at also as into Buddhism, you know, and looks into more modern thinkers, you know, like Deepak Chopra, what's this combination of science and the Eastern philosophy, as well as Eckhart Tolle, you know, and who I'm a big fan of, you know, a really big fan of, you know. Unfortunately, I've never met him. He's German also, but never met him. So I think he's more popular here than he is in Germany. But anyway, and I provide, and then I also looked at what have we learned from people who have died, you know, in the last days, you know, and also what have we learned from the research around longevity. And also I try to provide this so that people can make up their own mind and say, what is it that I care for, you know? Because there are some philosophies that say you want to be a good citizen, you want to do good for, you know, your community, you know. Others basically come to say it's your journey of self-discovery, you know, it's not an end point, it's a journey, you know. So there's a lot of ways, and you, I think in the end, should go on this journey yourself and figure out what is it that gives you joy and purpose.
If you were going to look at sort of your purpose as it's evolved, as you've gotten more wise and you've lived more and learned more, how has your purpose changed over your life?
Well, first of all, I don't think it's. I think I have more than one purpose, you know, and because I think I have more than one role, you know. I'm a husband, I'm a father, you know, and now even I have grandchildren, you know. So and I have certain purposes in that role, and then today, and I have my own businesses, you know, and also I'm mentoring CEOs, you know. So in each one, I follow a different purpose. I think the overarching thing is, I try to give people learnings that hopefully make them happier and more successful in life, and that they don't have to make all the mistakes that I've made, you know. So and I've learned from that, you know.
I think that it's important that purpose can evolve over time. I think that and also purpose doesn't have to be just one thing at a time. I think that's very wise, because I think that you're right. Everyone is trying to figure out what they're put on this earth to do, and it's confusing and it's difficult. You mentioned another thing too, which I want to understand the similarities and the differences. So you speak about values in the context of performance, but values to me sound very similar, or they're adjacent to purpose. So how would you consider, or how would you define values and purpose in terms of needing them to impact your performance as an individual? Can you perform without them, or do you need to figure those first?
Well, first of all, the word values doesn't say positive or negative values, but it's mostly meant as positive values, you know. So that's also how I use it in the book. There are people who say values are for the faint ones, you know. Power is just about power, and what really matters is that I get more power, you know, and they might see most of the things in life as a zero-sum game, you know, where I see it as, hey, it's about broadening the pie, and if we work together, we can all get a bigger piece than working against each other, you know. But that's not necessarily the common thought for everybody. I think you can't assume that, you know. So purpose is really something that either you want to directionally go in that direction or you want to achieve, you know? So that does not necessarily mean that it is a positive thing, you know? So values is about what does that, if you achieve that, what does that stand for, you know? So if you, let's talk about a wonderful Austrian fellow who happened to cause the world a lot of trouble, you know, who felt that his philosophy was a philosophy that he wanted to bring as a gift to the whole world and wanted to basically own it and cause the Second World War because of that, you know. So that his purpose was very clear, you know. He wanted domination, you know, for this, you know. So, but values-wise, I think most people would agree with me that that was not typically what we would consider as the right values, you know. No, and values is broader, you know, is broader than that. Broader than that. Purpose is about, in most cases, it's about outcome or going into direction of outcomes, you know.
And then the values is whether or not you're doing in the right way.
Yeah, whether
or in the moral way.
do it in the right way or it is something when you achieve it that makes the world a better place, you know. So
So you can have, as a business leader, you can have a high performer that has a purpose, but their values do not align.
and in fact, you have that more than you think.
I just want to take a second and thank FreshBooks for supporting today's episode. Now, there are three numbers that you have to know: 30 million, 60 billion, 192 hours. What do these mean? Over 30 million people have used FreshBooks. Over 60 million invoices have been paid through FreshBooks, and over 192 hours have been saved annually using FreshBooks all-in-one accounting. If you're an entrepreneur, a freelancer, a solopreneur, if you are tired of chasing payments and drowning in receipts, FreshBooks is here to make your life easier. It's the all-in-one accounting solution that helps you manage everything, from creating professional estimates and proposals to tracking time and automatically billing clients. If you need to capture expenses on the go, just snap a photo. With over 100 business integrations, FreshBooks fits perfectly into your workflow, and when tax time rolls around, everything is organized and ready for your accountant, or you can rely on FreshBooks' expert bookkeeping services. Over 30 million people have used FreshBooks, processing over $60 billion in invoices. And like I said, they're saving 192 hours annually. It's user-friendly, seamless, and offers award-winning customer service. Stop wasting your time on manual accounting. Start your 30-day free trial at FreshBooks.com. No credit card required. FreshBooks is offering 60% off for 6 months. This offer is valid from January 7th till March 4th. Make sure to head over to FreshBooks.com/pricing-offer. They will always have some great promotions for listeners of Success Story. That is FreshBooks.com/pricing-offer. What do you do with that person?
I have believed and seen it many times that if you do not eliminate that person from your firm as quickly as possible, you know, you have a cancer. You have a cancer and you will not be able to have an environment for high performers for a long time. You know, and so it works for, if somebody just optimizes short-term performance, it works. That's not an issue. And short-term can even be a few years, you know, but and if it's about a repetitive business, if it's some business where you don't need intelligence and you don't need people, you can do it as long as you want, you know. So it's kind of comes close to slavery, modern version of slavery, you know. But if you are in a business where which is most of the businesses these days, I mean, I would say 80% of the business worldwide need the skills of the individuals as the most important competitive advantage, because the world is so much changing and people have to immediately adopt, you know, and this is the ingenuity of humankind that shows us that. So there you have to be attractive for top-notch performers and you have to be able to make them work together. So people who are just in it for themselves and screw over others or kiss up and kick down, that's not what you want.
How, I mean, when you're just starting out, it's a little bit easier to figure out if these people have these value systems that don't align. But talk to somebody who's running a large organization, because there's people in this audience who do run large businesses, and I'm sure they know they have a cancer in their company, but it's very hard to find out where it is. When you scale to a certain point, what would be your strategy? When you have thousands of employees, what's the framework?
I think that your premise might not be right. You know, I think that a good leader very often has enough indicators to figure out that that person is not really somebody who works with the team, but it's rather, as I said, kissing up and kicking down. I think the harder thing for most leaders is if this is a top-notch performer and that performance matters for their performance as a leader, to then say, I'm going to kick that person out, because very often this is the biggest performer. And that makes your bonus, a part of your bonus. The biggest issue is, do I take the leap of faith and kick that person out, even though I know I cannot immediately replace the person with an individual that has the same performance? I've seen that being the most problematic thing, But I also address the first one. How do you find out? As a good leader, you should have your ear on the ground and see, very carefully watch. There are methods like Net Promoter Score that you can use as employee engagement. But even there, I've seen that leaders like this have a mechanism, to challenge their employees, to say it mildly, so that the Net Promoter Score looks well. But there are ways. I think for a decently experienced leader, it's not difficult. They sometimes probably have a good self-defense mechanism to feel that they are not sure and therefore they can't take action, maybe out of their own self-defense, to continue to have that acidic performer still there.
What would be, you've ran companies that are in the multi-billions of dollars of revenue. What would be one piece of advice that is applicable when you're running a company that size, that is still applicable to when you're just starting out?
There's a ton of those things, but the one thing, let me focus on one that's often probably forgotten or misunderstood. In the end, also, it's not only the strategy that's important. The strategy is very important, but you also have to have the skills of drilling down. And I think this combination of, on the one hand, being able to see where's the outside world going, what tendencies are there, what could work, what could not work, looking around the corner, that's extremely important. It is at the same time extremely important to also, if necessary, drill down to the very bottom level, go down to what is really going on there. Because if you only stay on this top level, you might find yourself in an ivory tower, isolated and not understanding that you think that that's the ship that you run in reality, and you think is a pretty nice cruiser, and in reality the machine room looks pretty ugly and they are cranking the engine and the oil is already spilling.
And you did that even when you were any of the company?
Always done that. That has been my second nature, I think, and also because I don't think you have to be an expert in this. I think what people, that's another thing that you learn, is it's not the answers that lead you, it's the questions that you ask. How many times, people, you can learn a lot through questions. So don't be shy. One of the red lights that go on for me is if somebody tells me after I've asked 3 times, Klaus, this is complicated and we won't have the time. And I say, look, wait a second, I have all the time. I just want to understand what's the issue here, Then the person goes in, starts to explain it, and I still can't understand it. After the 3rd time, I say, look, do you realize that you are talking mumbo jumbo to me in language that I don't understand? And I don't understand it, So then the person says, yeah, it's complicated. That we were there before, it's complicated, right? So, and then it comes the point where I say, look, just to make it crystal clear, who has a problem in this conversation? Me who do not understand that what you're saying, or you who cannot explain it to me? And to be very clear, I am your boss, so you have the problem.
I think it also shows. Well, I was going to say, I think it also shows their level of competence if they can find a way to simplify it.
To be honest, I have the privilege to also be an honorary senator, they call it, at the Nobel laureates meeting in Lindau. And when you talk to these individuals, highly accomplished in fields that I have foggiest ideas about, and you ask them, what exactly are you doing? Almost all of them can explain it to you in a language that you say, get it. I get it. I might not get all the details, but I get it.
Amazing. I want to just give a shout out. So the book Leading to Thrive, it's available everywhere you want to get books, so Amazon and all the regular bookstores. I have a couple just rapid fire to close it up, but before we finish this out, where else should people connect with you? Where are you most available on social or website, all of that?
there is a website, Leading to Thrive, and that is probably the easiest way. There's a way to connect with me. The biggest yes, so that's the way you should leave a message there and say, hey, this is what I want. Yes.
Oh no, I'll put that all in the show notes as well. Do you have any socials that you still keep running, or is it
the one that I really do myself is LinkedIn, and the other is because it's a professional environment. I'm not talking to the general audience. I'm talking to people who are leaders or want to be leaders, who want to learn about leadership. So LinkedIn is the right medium for that.
Just to close this out, first of all, I just want to say thank you for coming on. And I appreciate your time. Was there anything that you think is an important piece of wisdom to leave the audience with? A question that maybe I didn't ask you, or something that we didn't go into?
No, I don't think so. I think we touched most of the points, and I would just say, take a look, try some of the things out. I try to keep it as practical as possible, also language-wise. I'm a practitioner. I speak to practitioners, so it's not that I can't speak theoretically, but I don't think it's interesting, to be honest. So I hope it's enjoyable. It's enjoyable. No, I think we touched on most of the. Try it out. In the end, there's a number of things. Not everything works for everyone. So take a step. And as it says, the first step is always the most difficult, but in this case, it's always the most rewarding.
I think that's great. Listen, the lessons that you've learned over your career, you don't want somebody to feel like they're drinking from the fire hose, trying to take in X years of experience and wisdom and applying it into their startup tomorrow. But if they take one idea and they run with it, and it improves their lives by a measurable amount, that's a win. And then you take the next one.
Exactly.
The last question I always like to ask, because again, you've had a great career, multiple seasons of your life and of what you've built. If you could give one last lesson to not even your younger self, but say you wanted to impart some words of wisdom with your children, what would be some wisdom that you would want to leave them with?
Spend some time with yourself to learn who you are and who you want to be. Because that's the most difficult thing. Most people very often get carried along, and the path of life brings them somewhere, and then in a late point in time they realize that was not really what they wanted. And don't have fear, don't be fearful. My definition of fear is false expectation that appear real. False expectation appearing real, and that's very often the case, so, and have the courage, and follow the path of love it, change it, or leave it, and then I think the scenario is much more likely that you will have a happy, joyful life.